This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
I can't believe it's already Friday again. This week has just flown by so rapidly. I mean, I already had a lot going on to begin with, so I kind of figured that would be the case. Doesn't mean I've caught up on sleep yet. But who needs that? Sleep gets in the way of productivity. I heard that somewhere. Definitely not from anybody intelligent. But we're here. We're rolling onward. Just like Monday Night Raw. Or Retro NXT, as we're constantly hearing during those review episodes from those 2014 classics. Yeah, they were still using the lingo even back then. Of course, that just sounds lame in comparison to Raw rolls on. I don't know. NXT rolls on. Too many syllables, pal. But that's not on the docket for today. Today we've got the classic territory footage to go over. As per usual with our weekly Friday installments here on the FSWR channel. I know the bulk of the wrestling talk is everything surrounding the Vince drama and the Cody Rock storyline. All the stuff that's sending the Marks into a feat of rage. But that's why the FSWR channel's here. To balance out all that drama with some fun, casual wrestling talk. And that's what we're going to do today. At least we're going to try. Can't make any promises. But what do you say we get going with the Crockett review and see if I actually remember what I watched on that program? It's been like 5 days, so my memory's a little fried at the moment. But with all the live events going on with the various cities right now, trying to keep track of all the dates in my head. One of the bigger news bulletins to come out of this week's Saturday edition was the bench press challenge between the Road Warriors and the Powers of Pain. We were informed that nothing was resolved, but an injury was sustained in the heat of battle. And, as we're going over a few more of the details here, JR's mentioning something about the Varsity Club, and I'm completely distracted watching Tony Schiavone smirk and start making faces to somebody off camera. I have no idea what was happening, but I have to assume that since Larry Zbyszko and Baby Doll were in the opening TV match this week, I have to imagine Larry was doing something off camera that made Tony laugh. Maybe Baby Doll blew him a kiss or something. And all the while, JR is just trying to be a pro. Run down the format. David Crockett standing there, useless as always. The show's a train wreck and a half, and I love it. A wonderful start this week. So, as mentioned, Larry Zbyszko was in the opener. He wrestled Larry Stevens, which went from being the world's most incredibly boring squash to a 5-star classic in pretty quick succession. It's all very basic chain wrestling early on. And, well, because Larry Zbyszko is a genius worker, at the point Stevens tries to back him into the ropes and shoot him off, Larry then immediately starts beating the shit out of Stevens, claiming that his hair was pulled, which was beyond epic. Somewhere during this, we got like half a frame of Barry Windham in the shot, who apparently was scouting the match. The only thing I saw was Larry yelling at somebody off camera, and then a fairly dark silhouette kind of walk in and out of the shot. If it was Barry Windham, it was not apparent. In any case, Larry went over with the neck breaker. And then we had the most legendary David Crockett interview of all time. As he's standing there with Baby Doll and Zbyszko at ringside. I am not kidding you. This was his question. Larry, how does it feel hiding behind a woman? Fucking wow. The brass of this egomaniac. And I just like how Larry blew the question off and didn't even bother acknowledging it. He's like, fuck you, dude. Not even going to dignify that with a response. How does it feel hiding behind a woman? You should have just punted David right in the balls. Then we came back for Sting versus Dave Isley. They've now given Sting his artificial network theme music. It was supposed to give off the Surfer Beach vibes. Sounded very canned. Anyway, Sting fired up on Isley and killed him with a Stinger Splash in the corner. Went over with the Scorpion, which promptly bled into his post-match interview where he told Ric Flair, "You can call me Sting. You can call me Stinger. But you don't gotta call him Johnson." No, I just made that final part up. But if you recall from last week's show, JJ had that classic heel line where he called Sting a party crasher because Sting ruined Flair's 1987 Wrestler of the Year ceremony. So now Sting's even making a blatant joke out of it, saying you can call him the party crasher now because he's going to be crashing a lot of parties from here on out. And he's also crashing through waves to get to the Nature Boy. You like that? No, I made that one up too. See, I got a handful of zingers I can pull out of my back pocket every now and then. I can cut a promo when the motivation hits. I probably don't have as many zingers as Ole Anderson does, though. He is, he is leaps and bounds above my promo ability. So, speaking of the Handsome Devil, he was out at the booth with David to talk about the upcoming cage match in the Omni with him and Luger going up against Tully and Arn. He says it's been a year for him to stew on what the Horsemen did to Ole last year, and Ole knew that he wouldn't have been able to pick a fight by himself. That's why he laid in wait to see how the Horsemen would implode on themselves over time. And when they kicked Luger to the curb, that sealed their death warrant. Ole knew it was his time to strike. And it's really simple. After Luger and Ole get done making an example out of the Horsemen in Atlanta, after they ran their heads into the cage to make them look like hamburger meat, Ole's going to send his snot-nosed kid down to the ring to kind of pick the bones and see if the Horsemen have any fight left in them. To which I then asked myself, so you're going to beat up Arn and Tully until they're half dead, and then you're going to send your son down to finish the job? Does not seem like a proper redemption angle for your son, Ole. I'd maybe suggest cuffing them to the cage while they're still semi-conscious. That way the screaming in agony will be that much more cathartic. But perhaps I'm more sadistic than Ole Anderson was. Who knows? Really good promo, though. Then we had Tim Horner versus A Gladiator. Horner did some moves, about 1,800 arm drags, and then he won with a bridging roll-through. Meanwhile, the announcers spent a good chunk of the match talking about these sheep herders, mentioning that they've been, quote, a loud, boisterous bunch since coming to Crockett Promotions. Indeed. If you have listened to several sheep herders promos on the Superstation, loud. It's a very apropos term. They're like listening to a Paul Jones promo. It's nonsensical heel rambling for about 5 minutes, and then by the time they get done, you're like, wait, what the hell did they just say? And with the sheep herders, it's that question, plus, why is Johnny Ace standing behind them thinking about possibly groping women inappropriately? Oh, sorry. Too soon. So anyway, we were about 22 minutes into the show. Absolutely nothing of value had happened up to this point. And then we finally got some good story development. Now, I mentioned the bench press contest from Greensboro. They showed a brief snippet of that during the cold open here. But this is where they documented the full footage, and we saw everything that went down. It begins with Paul Jones instructing the weight to be distributed for the next portion of the challenge. They started off here with 475 pounds, which both teams were able to do pretty effortlessly. And then we start upping the ante to about 500 pounds, at which point things get really saucy as the Road Warriors begin to fire up during their huddle, and they go, all right, fuck this. We want 600. Rack the weights to 600 pounds. And this part is fucking phenomenal. As Paul Ellering goes to confront Jones, he dictates, we want 600 pounds. We're sick and tired of all this stalling and slow burn mind game trickery. Let's give the people what they want. And Paul Jones, brilliantly, as he's writing on his notepad, just calmly looks at Ellering and goes, no, we're going to do 500 pounds. This is my money on the line here, so we're playing by my rules. Oh, keep in mind, too, folks, there's $50,000 on the line for this challenge. The goal is to figure out who could bench press over 700 pounds. And spoiler, we never even got to that point, which was the ironic part, because as we came to find out, the whole thing was a setup from the beginning. As the Road Warriors are pumping themselves up and Animal's about to get down on the bench to do the 600-pound press, Ivan Koloff grabs the box of gym chalk, or whatever that stuff's called to help enhance your barbell grip. He throws it in Hawk's face to blind him, and that is when all hell begins to break loose. And you remember, the announcers brought up the tragic injury sustained during this beatdown. It was, in fact, the incident of Animal getting driven face first into the set of weights on the barbell, and Animal's laying there unconscious, selling it like he's dead. Meanwhile, the Powers of Pain leave with the money while the Legion of Doom is sprawled out. And, even Tony Schiavone mentioned it when they went back to the studio. It is a rare occurrence where we've ever seen the Road Warriors in a vulnerable state like that. We have not seen them laid out in that capacity for a very long time. But we do know, based on what happened to Animal, he suffered a broken orbital socket after having his head driven into those heavy weights. The impact of hitting the weights did substantial damage to Animal's orbital bone around the eye, and he was being overseen in medical care at Greensboro that night following the attack. That was the last update we heard on the Road Warriors. But we had more footage following the break. They do the whole stretcher job for Animal, carted him off to the back, and it was the perfect setup for this brilliant Paul Jones heat promo at the studio, where he and the rest of his army are yucking it up over the incident in Greensboro. Paul Jones informs everyone, I believe for the first time where this is officially recognized, that he wants his team to now be known as the Powers of Pain. Now, I know I've been subconsciously calling them that by their team name during these reviews, but I do not believe they were officially recognized as the Powers of Pain until this very program. At which point, Jones then signifies that they won the bench press contest, quote, fair and square. And if the Legion of Doom want to prove otherwise, they can meet the POP in a ladder match to see who can scale up and grab the money first. Now, of course, with Animal's injury, he's not going to have an easy time climbing. To which Paul and Ivan look at each other and begin snickering like douchebags. I love it. He also indicated that they will be going after the 6-man tag team trophy. They won Dusty and the Road Warriors. Credit to anybody that actually remembered who the 6-man tag team champions were in this company. And that was all well and good. As was Ivan making his comment about Hawk, laughing that he was so nervous watching Animal try to bench press 600 pounds. All that hand chalk made its way to his face. He was sweating so badly. And then to cap off this all-time great promo, while the heels are laughing and tooting their own horn at everything that went down, we hear Paul Jones scream to the top of his lungs, "Losers! Losers!" God, this is fucking phenomenal. If only the angle wasn't all for naught. It's disappointing. I think I mentioned the whole dud that was the Road Warriors versus Powers of Pain storyline in 1988, where once Warlord and Barbarian found out the end game was for them to work a bunch of scaffold matches with the Road Warriors, all of which they would end up losing. They pulled the Hulk Hogan card and said, "That doesn't work for us, brother." And they pretty much left the territory before any of those matches ever happened. I do believe we still get the 6-man tag match with them and Ivan versus Dusty and the Road Warriors. But, yeah, none of those scaffold matches ever take place. Because that was all supposed to happen during the Bash tour. And, from what I remember, too, I don't think the ladder matches happened either. I don't even think ladder matches were part of the original plan. That just might have been Paul Jones going into business for himself and then making shit up on the fly that was never going to come to fruition. So I don't know what that was all about. But man, it just sucks. Because you look at this stuff in a bubble, it was all really well done to build up heat for the program. But the fact that we never actually got a proper payoff to any of it kind of made this whole 15-minute segment pointless, right? Losers! Losers! Fucking Paul Jones, dude. He was the best. And again, this all goes back to Tony's comment about how it's one of the few times we've ever seen the Road Warriors laid out. I mean, you could count on one hand the amount of times that's ever happened. So you could tell they were putting a lot of stock behind the feud. They wanted it to work. I mean, even the Midnights didn't get a stretcher job out of the Road Warriors. The Powers of Pain did. And what do we get out of it? Beyond a whole lot of nothing. How unfortunate. Then we had Dickie Murdoch versus Bob Emery, where Cornette proceeded to use every derogatory term in the English dictionary to put over how despicable Murdoch was, including using the word cantankerous. There's a fucking $1 million word for the day. Try getting that one on your local spelling bee. And of course, he means all of this in a positive light. As long as Mama Cornette's happy, it's all that matters. So, well, it's a Dick Murdoch squash, so you kind of know what you're in for. He pounds away on the job guy for a while, ends up throwing him through the interview podium and then breaking the thing into pieces. There's a great bit here where Murdoch is stomping on Emery on the floor, and off camera we see a giant plank of wood fly in so Murdoch can catch it and then start wailing away on Emery. At which point, Jim Ross, taking up the role of me on this channel after weeks and weeks of calling this out, just goes, "Hasn't the referee ever heard of a disqualification?" Well, if I didn't know any better, I'd have thought Jim was calling a match on Dynamite. The answer, by the way, was no. No, you could basically do whatever the fuck you want on these studio shows, and there were no ramifications. I mean, didn't we see Magnum TA and Dusty Rhodes attempt to commit murder on Jim Cornette? Just throwing it out there. So Murdoch went over with something. I kind of stopped paying attention after a while. I did, however, pay attention to the awesome interview after the break with the Midnights and Murdoch. As Cornette comes over, he starts immediately going off on Misty Blue, as only Jim knows how to do, saying she looks like a girl that went to an axe fight and forgot the axe. He says he knows exactly what Dusty's game plan is by trying to get Cornette inside the ring in Baltimore for that 6-man tag. So Corny's been doing his Richard Simmons training workout videos to get in shape for the event. He's doing push-ups, sit-ups, chin-ups. And the best part is, he's only thrown up one time, which I had a good chuckle at. And as he's talking about what Stan, Bobby, and Dickie are going to do to Misty if she decides to get physical with Corny, he begins talking about how Murdoch, in particular, doesn't care if it's a woman, child, grizzly bear, or 3 turtles. He will kick the shit out of anyone and anything. At which point, they begin to zoom the camera out to show Murdoch's face in the frame. When he hears Corny drop the line about bears and turtles, he then raises his head, kind of cocks it sideways like, wait, what the fuck is this lunatic talking about? I'm also not sure what to make of him implying that Stan and Bobby would have no issue slapping a woman in broad daylight. But, I guess we're supposed to accept that as Corny being a heel. I do not advocate for male-on-female violence, people. If you are a man listening to me right now, don't hit women. It's not morally acceptable. So then the segment just completely fell apart here, as Dickie began shouting a bunch of shit while his face turned purple. I had no idea what he was talking about. The highlight of which was Corny going, "Murdoch, your breath." And then right as Stan and Bobby are holding back Dickie, uncontrollably laughing and breaking character, by the way, Jim removes his suit jacket so he can try to show all the female bodybuilders what a real set of guns looks like. At which point, Corny flexes at the camera to reveal his giant pit stains under his arms, which had to be a shoot. So it makes the whole thing that much funnier. I don't know how you work a pit stain. Meanwhile, David's standing there laughing his ass off. Cornette's promising to choke the life out of Misty Blue. This is a 5-star promo segment with a 6-star finish. Watching Cornette flex his arms, revealing these sweat stains under his armpits. Can't make this shit up, folks. He was a true one of a kind. Then we had Arn and Tully versus Max McGiver and John Savage. My notes read as follows. Tully struts, Arn kills, JJ approves. Print that shit on a fucking t-shirt. It'll sell like candy. You can also sell Double A's promos in a compilation series, and they would equally sell like candy. At least they would sell to the trainees that actually are looking to become better talents, not just the synchronized parkour artistes. So Double A's talking about how when it comes to guys like Ole and Luger, they were hedging their bets that the downfall of the Horsemen would come the day both men were canned from the group. Yet here they still stand as the superior athletes. And it doesn't matter what kind of performer you are in the sport of wrestling, no set of athletes alive are matched to the level of Tully and Arn. Not Barry Windham, not Lex Luger, not Sting, not Ole, no one. And he tells Ole to remember one thing. Arn is the only Horseman left standing worth a damn. At which point Tully goes, what do you say we give Luger and Ole an opportunity? After we beat them in the cage in the Omni, we will hire them to personally wash our BMWs. Just because we're nice guys. Gotta love Tully, man. He's the kind of snide, douchey bad guy that we can all get behind. Never has to say much to get his point across. Meanwhile, Double A's the one firing up here and delivering the stern heel promo. Tully's such a great counterbalance to all that. He just brings everything home so perfectly. Doesn't need to scream. Doesn't need to shout. He could if he wanted to. But Ole did all the talking. He can just stand there and throw a couple asshole-ish lines out there and move right on. And he does it with a smile. That's the best part. Arn's the pissed-off juggernaut. Tully's the laid-back, swaggy dirtbag. And then JJ's just there to cheer him on, basically. The perfect combo. So up next, in our designated piss break portion of the show, it's the Italian Stallion versus Gene Ligon. I wrote down one sentence and it reads as follows. Watching paint dry would be more captivating. So that went about 5 minutes. And then we had a J.J. Dillon Ric Flair promo. Stop. Pause. Did Ric Flair not just announce like 1 week ago that he was not returning to television until Jim Crockett signed the match between him and Sting? What the fuck was he doing back at the studio? Did Jim demand Flair show up to work? Did he hold his contract up? Well, that didn't last long, did it? The suspense was too much for the ratings to handle. They said, all right, scrap that stipulation. We need Flair on TV. So here, we had JJ set up the story for Sting, somehow drawing a connection between him and a childhood dog of JJ's that used to run out chasing cars. No idea what the hell he was talking about. And then Flair saved it by cutting what I coined a fiery babyface promo, despite him still being a heel in kayfabe. He began his promo, this is no joke, by calling these studio fans logical, intelligent wrestling fans because they understand what this great sport is all about. They understand that the National Wrestling Alliance is the place to be. And I'll concede, spoiler for some of the latter promo work here, I mean, this basically wound up turning into a company infomercial plug. Flair's just putting over Crockett Promotions as the best wrestling product in the world. saying it's not about popularity contests or who has the best physique. It's about wrestling. It's about proving you are among the elite. And as I'm sitting there listening to Flair be the company spokesman for about 5 minutes, I'm like, how in the fuck is any of this tying in with the Sting or Luger stuff? How is this getting heat on Ric Flair? Well, somehow he wound up bringing up Sting and Luger into that conversation somewhere. He referred to Sting as a bum and an overbearing prick, essentially burying him by saying, I only fight men on my level, but because I'm so full of myself, I will humor your little challenge and take you up on that fight. Saying that no one puts their hands on the mastermind of the Horsemen, JJ, and gets away with it. And, well, in actuality, the promo went about 2 hours. I believe I only retained about a quarter of that information. But that was essentially the outline. Despite him still being the top heel in the company, here's Ric Flair just cutting fucking white meat babyface promos in the middle of the show, talking about how great the company is. That heat magnet the Nature Boy was. Then we came back for Luger and Barry versus Tony Suber and Bob Riddle. Within a matter of seconds into the match, they put the camera on two lovely ladies in the crowd watching, and I can all but confirm that Tony Schiavone popped wood at the sight of seeing them. You'd have thought he never saw a set of boobs in his life, he was so animated. So as we know, based on the face-off between Barry and Luger a few weeks back, those guys are temporarily on the same page together as a team. They'll be going after the Horsemen pretty soon, so they're trying to rack up some wins to earn some credibility. Former friends, as we recall. That wasn't until Luger stabbed Barry in the back in early '87 by jumping to the dark side. And the animosity was heated for quite a while. But they seemed to be on the same page. Temporarily. The match was about 2 minutes of back and forth tags between Luger and Barry, and then Barry somehow won with a lariat. And then we cut to the booth where they got to do a promo. David Crockett referred to them as the Twin Towers. Well, you know, retrospective history. So anyway, they contributed nothing of value here. Barry said, "Look at us. We're a force to be reckoned with." And then Luger said something to the extent of, "We're coming after the Horsemen like they've never been comed after before." Almost a direct quote. And then Luger did some bicep poses, and then girls screamed, and then they left. It was a very riveting 2 minutes of television, which led to a Paul Ellering Hawk promo after the break. They were here to provide a status update on Animal's condition. Ellering let us know that the eye surgery went well, and on February 13th, the Road Warriors will be in Baltimore to defend their six-man tag team championship. But for now, Hawk's got some stuff he wants to scream about. And boy, did he ever. And you know, let me say this up front. I have not been the biggest advocate of Hawk's promos on this channel. To say he stretches the boundaries of cartoon comedy a little too much, it's an understatement. Especially in the last year or so, he's gone like full throttle with over-the-top cartoon delivery. With that said, This was the kind of serious Hawk promo that we needed for a situation like this. He explains that when the powers of pain took out Animal, they hurt Hawk just the same. They've always been there for each other, and Hawk is going to be by Animal's side during his recovery. And all this does is spell bad news for the powers of pain, because they made the biggest mistake of their lives when they didn't finish the job in Greensboro, when they didn't put the Legion of Doom out of their misery for good. All they did was leave the door open for the Road Warriors to come back and finish the job themselves. And if Hawk were in Barbarian or the Warlord's shoes right now, he'd be shaking and shivering. Even the toughest of times, the Road Warriors snack on danger and dine on death. And from where Hawk stands right now, with all the pent-up hate he has in his heart, he wouldn't want to be the powers of pain. Just fucking awesome, dude. The kind of raging Hawk promo that actually sounded like genuine rage. Genuine hate. We all know how intense those guys are when they're just a regular set of pissed-off ass-kickers. But now you give them an incentive to come back for blood? I mean, Hawk said all there was and needed to be talked about. When Barbarian and Warlord meet face-to-face with the Road Warriors, death may indeed factor into that fight. And it was great, too, because it was still done in Hawk delivery. He was still seething. He was still pissed off. But this is the kind of rage we really haven't seen from the Road Warriors in a very long time. You know, it's a situation where someone tried to end the Road Warriors' careers. Something no one has come remotely close to doing yet. And Hawk's not just fighting to beat people up because it's cool. He's avenging a fallen brother, his partner. That is Road Warrior rage on steroids. So this is all fantastic. Definitely brought a lot of stunned silence into the room. You could tell these people feared for the powers of pain themselves. And then about 5 seconds after that, we hear the Syracuse fight song play as Mike Rotunda and Rick Steiner come out to have their match with Andrew Bellamy and Dave Spearman. Not the kind of music I was expecting to follow such a grim segment. Peppy marching band music. So, well, I didn't write a whole lot down about this, aside from my first comment about the opening spot. Quote, Rick Steiner dumps Spearman on his neck with a German and almost kills him. Yeah. But beyond that, Steiner went over with a belly-to-belly throw. And then we had a Varsity Club promo afterwards, sponsored by the Three Stooges. It is Mo, Larry, and Curly acting all wacky and doing gag comedy while Sullivan's trying to cut the serious heel promo. During this conversation, he mentioned something about how the Varsity Club are here to stomp all the competition in the NWA. They're here to stab all the rats hiding under the floorboards. The Dusty Rhodes, the Barry Windhams, the Lex Lugers of the world. To which Mike Rotunda makes the joke, just like how Syracuse stabbed Michigan in the football league. Which then led to Rotunda and Steiner getting into a shouting match. And Sullivan called them Dogface and Pinhead. And then got them back in line. And the rest of it was just Sullivan doing an oddball heel promo while Rotunda and Steiner were continuing to act wacky. And the look on David Crockett's face, it was a toss-up between utter confusion or concern for his well-being. Or perhaps both. This is still my favorite incarnation of Mike Rotunda's gimmick, by the way. With Rick, kind Kind of liked him better when he and Scott were just dumping dudes on their heads with wrestling moves. The whole CTE gimmick he ran with for the early part of his career, I don't know. Seemed a little too goofy for me. Oh yeah, no, Sullivan said he was going to go teach someone a lesson in the ring. And he did exactly that in his match with Ryan Wagner. In the first 10 seconds, he took a folding chair, heaved it right at the back of Wagner's head. I thought he killed him. Of course, that was not an automatic disqualification. What was a DQ, however, was Sullivan shoving Teddy Long to the ground twice while he still had Wagner tied up in the Tree of Woe. And then all three guys hit the ring and started ganging up on Wagner. So just so we're on the same page here. Striking a man in the back of the head with a chair to give him an apparent concussion. Not a DQ. Shoving the referee to the ground for trying to break up a fight in the corner. Easy DQ. Got it. So after that, we had the Stinger come out for a promo. And he's here to crash some more parties. Tired of waiting. He knows Flair's in the building, so he's calling him out right now. And as the suspense builds with Stinger pacing around waiting for Flair to come face-to-face with him, he and JJ eventually make their way to the podium so Flair can address Sting personally. And he actually repeats a lot of what he said earlier when it comes to calling Sting an overbearing, pompous, nothing-happening punk kid, noting that Sting's never lived a horseman lifestyle and he never will. He'll never know what it's like to dress in style or wear alligator shoes because he has no class. He even goes as far as to insult him by saying his parents were classless for not even being able to give him a proper name. And that's when Flair tries to grab Sting's nose in the ultimate sign of disrespect. And, Sting ain't having any of that. So the fight is on. Sting grabs Flair and throws him into the ring. They start doing all their classic Sting-Flair spots we've seen a million times over the years. I mean, you can almost call most of that shit in your sleep. And right as Flair's backed into the corner with Sting in control, here come the rest of the Horsemen to save his life. That eventually brings out Luger and Barry to even the odds and send the Horsemen packing. I very much enjoyed the shot here where Flair sprints in from off camera, running as fast as humanly possible with a folding chair. It was something straight out of a fucking comic book. Flair zooms into the camera shot from out of nowhere, looking crazed beyond belief. And he flies past the camera so fast, when they actually get the studio cams to focus on the ring again, Flair had already had the chair confiscated from him. Then he's running toward the back with Tully and Arn. I rewatched that sequence over and over again. I could not believe how fucking fast Ric Flair ran during that spot. He was definitely cranked on that woo energy, if you know what I mean. Holy shit, this is awesome. And even though it defies all logic of the segment where, Flair vowed he wasn't going to appear on TV again until the match with Sting was signed, they've absolutely done everything to make this a must-see attraction. And the great thing about it is Flair calling Sting a bum and underneath his level. Like, to the average smart fan, you can kind of treat that as a burial if you're purely judging it by the promo battle. But what makes it work is that Flair's still getting his ass kicked by Sting in most cases. Both physically and psychologically. Like, he's driven Flair up a wall to the point where Flair's accepted the challenge just to shut the guy up. Tired of being disrespected. He played right into Sting's hand. And we're still like a month and a half out from that match taking place, too. They got so much heat for it. Literally after like 1 month's worth of build. And it's important to remember, it really doesn't take all that much. You don't need to do 9 to 12 months of complex booking where it's impossible to tell what's going on or who's on what side. This is all very simple. Almost too simple. So, naturally, I thought that would have been an appropriate time to end the show. Hot angle with all the top guys. Crowd's going nuts for everything. Seemed logical to fade to black from there. But turns out we had another 5 minutes left in the show. So we had a Midnight Express squash with Mike Jackson and Alan Martin. Much like every Midnight Squash involving Mike Jackson, the spots with him and Bobby are always fun. We usually get about 30 to 45 seconds of that. And then his partner tags in and looks like a fish out of water while Stan and Bobby are having to carry him. In this case, Stan got so fed up with Alan Martin's suckage, he just dumped him right on the back of his head with a suplex and didn't even give a shit how he landed. And they just beat him like 10 seconds later with a double goozle. And that bled into the closing Midnight's promo, where the announcers took a few seconds to mock the idea of Jim Cornette in spandex. Meanwhile, Corny mocked David Crockett for dressing in a lot of suspicious attire in his private life. And, he plugged the six-man tag in Baltimore one more time. Promised that Misty Blue would regret the day she tried to embarrass JC on live television. And then as Dickie tried to infer that he and the Midnights were going to celebrate, we see them abruptly fade to the ending credits while beautiful Bobby was desperately trying to shake him off like, "Please stop touching me. This is very uncomfortable." And I really don't know what was going on there. It was a strange conclusion. I mean, to be fair, I love the Midnights. Why exactly did we need this segment? Just to try to fit a Midnights match in there? I don't know. I'll tell you what, though, man. The last few shows have definitely turned around for the better. I mean, there have been a handful of duds for the better part of the last few months in Crockett Promotions. And we already remember that January of '88 was nothing to write home about from a product intrigue standpoint. Just wasn't a whole lot going on. But I've been thoroughly impressed with the last few shows. The Sting Flair build is off the charts. The Horsemen's beef with Luger and Ole is great. How they're going about handling all that. I know the Midnight's Misty Blue thing was not everybody's cup of tea, myself included. But I'm getting some mild enjoyment out of all the wacky JC Dick Murdoch segments. You know, him just going out there and being all deranged and unhinged. Brings a smile to a lot of people's faces. Including the announcers, who wind up breaking character more often than not. But, you know, I sense they're trying to bring some life and energy back to this program, and it's kind of been needed since the Starrcade 87 fallout. Well, on the subject of impressive programs, need I say any more when it comes to Mid-South Wrestling TV? Now, week by week, the shows are becoming more and more must-see. The influx of great talent coming in, the layered storylines they've got circulating at the moment. And just as always, the shows are easy to follow. I'm not straining myself trying to write down 40 different goddamn things happening in one segment. It's nice to watch a wrestling program that isn't nonstop crash TV for 45 minutes. Or 2 frickin' hours. You know, before I start venting about Antonio Kanoki, Let's get into the Mid-South show. Right from the jump, we've established our story for the week. We know about the mysterious disappearance from Stagger Lee ever since the JYD return. And over the last few episodes, he had not been seen at the shows to defend the North American title. So we have Bill Watts holding the now vacant North American title, looking as only the North American title did back at this point in '83, before they did the complete overhaul and actually kind of made it look like a semi-presentable championship. This looked like something a kid put together in gifted class. The most hideously designed championship I think I've ever seen. With all the jagged edges and the slightly tilted plates everywhere. So janky. In any case, he explained that Stagger Lee had essentially relinquished the belt and that the dog was going to step in and take his place. Or as Bill Watts noted here, has clearly taken his place in some areas. You see what you did there, Bill? And, the gist of it was Charlie Lay was looking into the best solution, seeing as how the Mid-South area is currently without a top champion, with more details to follow. He also took a minute to plug a JYD photo compilation, basically in the form of a pamphlet. And, really high-end production is what Watts claimed. Technology has really come a long way since the 80s. If that is what they considered high resolution in 1983, God, if only Bill Watts knew what was to come. So anyway, the opening match was Tim Horner versus Sonny Rogers. Rogers sporting his absolutely appalling hippie-colored ring trunks. My side note here reads, if Joey Ryan shaved his chest, stopped working out for about 2 years, and then turned into a giant vat of mayonnaise, that is what Sonny Rogers looked like. Among the many hideous visuals of Sonny Rogers here, I also kept replaying some very funny clips, especially the spots where he was running the ropes, where he legitimately threw his arms up in the air like a Scooby-Doo cartoon. And with his fat belly jiggling all over the place, that did not help my composure. So, Sonny Rogers, my new favorite job talent in Mid-South. Abhorrently vulgar, both in the ring technically and physically. This also had a fabulous what the fuck finish, as Horner's backing Rogers into the corner. From out of nowhere, Rogers gives Horner a karate thrust to the throat. And at first, I didn't actually catch the spot until I heard Alfred Neely call for the bell. And then I was like, wait, what the hell happened again? Sure enough, Rogers was disqualified for using an illegal karate chop, which I had absolutely no memory of ever being illegal in Mid-South. I knew top rope offensive moves were against the rules. I had no clue a karate chop was grounds for disqualification. Who'da thunk it? But yeah, that was mostly a waste of 7 minutes. Didn't even give Horner the win, which was the humorous part. But I did get a good chuckle out of the visual horrors that was Sonny Rogers. The kind of guy you would shield from the kids in public spaces. Then we came back for Hacksaw Duggan versus Joe Stark. Oh, by the way, I did not talk about this. That previous Tim Horner match was mainly one giant infomercial so Bill Watts could call Michael Hayes and the Freebirds a bunch of low-life, gutless pussies. Because again, remember, the Freebirds' heel turn had just happened in Dallas like 2 months prior, so he was still fuming over that incident. We all know how much Watts loved ragging on Michael Hayes for being a sissy. Speaking of Bill Watts' commentary, wait until you hear my notes for this match. This is legendary. Duggan wins with the rope guillotine. Duggan is still spelled with 2 G's. Now, for those that know, you will get the joke. If not, just go listen to my previous, I don't know how many Mid-South reviews where, I kind of talk about the ongoing rib of how they pronounce Duggan's name. I also don't know what the proper term is for the rope guillotine spot. It's a thing like you go to pick the guy up overhead like you're about to give him a body slam, but instead of dropping him straight down on his back, you just kind of throw him rope or throat first into the ropes. Someone will give me the actual name for that move. They call it a stun gun, right? Or maybe that's something else. I'm going to have so many people in the comments now. Dude, how do you not know the name of that move? We see it all the time in WWE and AEW. And I'll just be like, okay. But when random job guys do it that nobody gives a fuck about, doesn't mean as much. So up next, we had Kamala destroying Buddy Landel in relatively short order. We did, however, hear Watts give Landel an endorsement, vowing that he would one day become a big star. And all it took was him dyeing his hair bleach blonde and stealing Ric Flair's gimmick. But this was mostly a one-sided annihilation. Kamala gave Landel a few throat chops, which somehow apparently weren't illegal in this match, unlike that Tim Horner-Sonny Rogers match from earlier. And then Kamala hit his running splash 2 seconds later and won. Yeah. Still trying to figure that one out myself. Your guess is as good as mine. And that brought us to Kelly Kiniski versus Tony Atlas, which somehow, some way, it was not horrible. I know. Hard to believe. Especially for a Kelly Kiniski match. Look, I'd even go as far as to say it was relatively good for a Tony Atlas match. There was a spot here where Atlas gave Kiniski an elevated back body drop. I thought he was going to launch Kiniski into the rafters. He got him so high up. And I'll give him credit too. Kiniski was bumping and feeding like crazy for the guy. He wasn't dogging him, so to speak. I know that's not the correct term to use at all. I just like that phrase for some reason. It's very modernly stupid. So, anyway, they're doing the match. Like I said, considering the parties involved, it's actually relatively decent. And then at the very end, it turns into what I branded as the modern-style video game match, where Atlas proceeded to do about 500 aerial moves in a row, including multiple head-scissor takeovers and standing drop kicks. And then after said 500 aerial moves, he hit his running splash off the ropes for the 3 count. God, the Beta Bucks would have been so proud. Total gymnast performance. That was the last 45 seconds. But hey, I'll take it. After that Tony Atlas Tug Taylor match a few weeks ago, this is like watching Brett and Owen from WrestleMania 10 again. Now, granted, Tony Atlas at this point is just kind of a guy spinning his wheels in the territory. And I know they had him stick around for a little bit longer, but I mean, I can't for the life of me remember the next big thing he's involved with. By 84, I know he's already back in the WWF. But I don't think Atlas sticks around Mid-South for another full year before leaving. He might have been somewhere else in between. You know, someone can go research that and let me know. But I'll go ahead and move on to the next match on the card with this classic Reeser Bowden ring intro, a handicap match, pinning Tom Renesto Jr. and Mike Bond against a man who stands alone, who is also very tall, Andre the Giant. You know, just in case you couldn't tell, the fact that Andre's tall, because he's a giant. So after we established that groundbreaking news caption, Andre squashes are always fun. I always love going back and watching these old handicap matches. Two completely worthless job guys getting fed to him while Andre's out there having a good time, beating ass and brushing him off like nothing. But this also gave Bill Watts a little bit to talk about the men that have stood across the ring from Andre over the years. The bigger men that have not been able to solve that puzzle of beating Andre, including the big cat Ernie Ladd, who was only slightly smaller than Andre, both from a height and weight standpoint. And that led the conversation to Kamala, who we all know is a big monster heel that's shown up in the Mid-South territory. Since his debut, no one has been able to beat him, much less take him off his feet. So they are really pushing that Andre-Kamala matchup as the big dream match, so to speak. And we'll obviously see more interaction between both those guys in weeks to come. There is a huge TV angle coming up pretty soon from what I remember. One that'll give Hulk Hogan a nice bit of revisionist history. With all the lying that sack of dog shit has done over the years. It'll be good to humble his ass again. So yeah, Andre pretty much destroyed these guys in like 3 minutes. Played with them for a little bit. No-sold a bunch of their punches and clobbering attempts. And then once he had Bond grounded, he picked Renesto up from out of the corner, press-slammed him onto Bond's dead body, and then sat down to pin both of them simultaneously. And, we'll just overlook the fact that Renesto was laying stomach first over Bond during the pin. So technically, only Mike Bond was pinned. But what can you do? And from there, we had, I guess you would call what you would call the big story push for the week. Now, we already addressed the Stagger Lee situation, so I won't revisit that again. But we have Watts interviewing Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne. Next week, those men will be defending the Mid-South tag titles against Andre and Tony Atlas. And as you can probably imagine, DiBiase's a little peeved about that booking call. He states here that 2 weeks in a row, he was screwed out of his shot at the North American title. And now that we found Stagger's relinquished belt, it's absurd to think DiBiase shouldn't be outright handed the belt as a result of forfeit. And now this tag title situation is an excuse for Mid-South to ward off the Rat Pack from the territory. By the way, I just want to point this out too. DiBiase delivering this promo while wearing a pullover knit sweater. There was something oddly comical about that. Like, he's trying to be a villain so badly, but I just can't take him seriously wearing that fucking sweater. And for the record, it's hard to dispute any of what DiBiase's saying. by all accounts, he has been fucked over twice at getting his North American title match. So, while yes, he's a heel, yes, the Rat Pack have been responsible for a lot of heinous acts on this program as of late. I mean, the guy is still technically owed a title shot. Come on now. But that'll be for next week. Then after that, we went back to the ring for what was supposed to be the big TV feature this week. JYD and Mr. Wrestling 2 teaming up to face Marty Lundy and Don Bass. The ultimate power couple. But before things got underway, here come the Rat Pack to negotiate with Lundy and Bass. Pull them aside and let them know that they want to buy out their contract so they can wrestle 2 and the Dog. And the conversation didn't take a whole lot of time, as DiBiase and Bourne managed to convince Double A and Bass to hit the showers. And from there, it's on, baby. It's on like Donkey Kong. To coin one of the modern WWE commentators. I can't remember which one. I used to hear it all the time, and I never even got the reference until I looked it up and figured out that it was a video game character. So, well, to be honest, I really can't explain what was going on here. If there was ever a TNA WCW book segment on Mid-South TV, this would be the closest model. The bell, to my knowledge, never officially sounded when DiBiase and Bourne hit the ring. And while there's a 4-way brawl happening with both teams, Lundy and Bass end up running back down to try to help out the Rat Pack. So it is now 4-on-2 advantage heels. Naturally, Dog and 2 gain the upper hand eventually and manage to thwart off all parties. But they eventually get the visual pins on Lundy and Bass, even though, again, the bell did not sound to start the match, and those 2 weren't even technically part of the match at that point. But Neely said, fuck it, I'm going to count anyway. So the end result, JYD and Wrestling 2 win by pinning the wrong tag team. This was so WCW in every conceivable way. But at the same time, it's awesome because, look, I mean, let's be blunt. It was just a total throwaway match anyway, so who cares? It's not like they were booking this as their world title main event on pay-per-view. People really would have been up in arms about it. Here, it was just the Rat Pack tried to outgame JYD in Wrestling 2, but their plan got thwarted. The babyfaces came out with their hands raised. So everybody wins. Didn't really set up DiBiase and Bourne all that well for their title match next week with Andre and Atlas, but yeah, they're heels. Who gives a fuck? Then we had a standby match with Iron Mike Sharp versus Art Cruz. I wrote very little down about this, mostly because I think I fell asleep. And by that, I mean I spaced out and forgot virtually everything that happened. There's a reason they call it the standby match. It is the buffer segment after the important material has already happened. Now, Cruz is a relative newcomer to the territory. We've seen him in a handful of underneath matches now. Sharp is a guy who, a lot like Atlas, is just kind of a name that's around the Mid-South territory, but, I mean, he's already got one foot out the door anyway. I don't think we'll be seeing much of him around before he leaves for the WWF as well. For what it was fine. Sharp won with a clothesline off the ropes. Pretty straightforward wrestling. And I will say, Watts is always good at putting over the subtle things when it comes to these young guys working their way up through the ranks and trying to make a name for themselves. Some of them panned out a lot better than others. we'll just leave it at that. Then right before we close things out, we get Andre and Tony Atlas with Bill Watts to share their brief thoughts on the upcoming Mid-South Tag title match next week. And it's very straight to the point. Andre and Atlas want to prove they're the best team in Mid-South. The Rat Pack are very formidable challengers, but they've always got that numbers game going in their favor. But because Andre's a massive human being, he should be able to thwart off the outside parties, which in this case would be Duggan. Or Dugan, depending on your preference. But that was Mid-South for the week. Kind of a paint-by-numbers TV program. Really didn't move the needle much in the way of major story arcing, but we did get confirmation that Stagger Lee is basically gone. So that North American title situation is where the bulk of the conversation is happening at the moment. And we'll see what happens in that Mid-South Tag title match next week. As always, though, with the Mid-South episodes, each show carries and bleeds into the other very well. Even if not every story is followed up on from week to week, they still have those guys on the show actively working matches. Or Bill Watts is explaining contextual timelines during various segments. So you're always kept in the loop about shit. And it makes a world of difference, man. It really does. And that leads us into the world-class discussion for the week. Kind of like what I just covered with the Mid-South show. Not really moving the needle much in the way of major story angles. It's kind of what world-class was this go-around. Anytime you have a show where half the program is devoted to an encore presentation, and you can tell they didn't really have much in the can tape for the show to begin with. Not that reliving the Midnight Express Fantastics match was a bad thing. I'm obviously referring to the most recent one where the Midnights actually captured the belts from the Fantastics. Not that asinine booking call from the Star Wars where they had the Midnights job in their first match in the territory. And, well, as always the case with these encore matches, especially for the ones we really just recap not too far back, I always just say go listen to that recap. You don't want to hear me regurgitate the same talking points again. I remember I broke this down pretty substantially. My TLDR description would mainly be talking about how much heat the match had. And man, even rewatching it on replay, I think I underestimated just how fucking wild the fans were for this match. Obviously the finish of the Midnights winning the straps thanks to Jim Cornette's racket shot from the floor. It was pretty great listening to the outpour of seething women from the crowd. Basically motherfucking Jim Cornette in broad daylight. Not even attempting to censor the bad language. I believe we also got a goddamn in there. And of course, that set up the pre-taped interview in the locker room where the Midnights are holding the straps up. JC's cutting this brilliant heel promo using all the classic corny jingoisms. First, he explained that the only reason Tommy Rogers even made contact with his racket was that Rogers was about a split moment away from falling through the ropes and breaking his neck. So like the good Samaritan that he is, JC wanted to make sure that he was protected. So he held the racket up to save Rogers from falling to his death. Because he's a good-hearted man, as we all know. Then he took a minute to put over his men and claimed that the Fantastics may be good-looking and well-groomed, but they're about as phony as a get-well card from an Undertaker. Meanwhile, his boys, this is almost a direct quote, rank at the top with arthritis and polio as one of the three great cripplers. He also forgot to mention an important fourth caveat to that conversation. Chris Benoit. Maybe that's too soon. And there were some other good lines in here. I always love Corny's banter with Bill Mercer. Those guys really gel when it comes to back and forth verbal jousting. Just because Mercer is so straightforward and stoic. But yeah, great stuff. Again, it just sucks that they never had anything major planned for the Midnights in Dallas outside that feud with the Fantastics, basically. And on the topic of beautiful Bobby and Loverboy Dennis, they had a brief TV squash at the Sportatorium with Jose Lothario and Johnny Mantell. I noted from the top here, the fans seemed to get on Cornette's case for trying to give beautiful Bobby a good luck hug before the match. I guess the Dallas faithful did not approve of such suspect behavior. I mean, it was the South after all. So anyway, okay, how do I describe this match? As a Midnight Express mark, do I try to be brutally honest, or do I look for excuses to put the Midnights over while at the same time criticizing the match? I will say this. If there was ever an overcompensation performance on Bobby and Dennis's part to try to get the match over, this would be high up on that list. By the time it was over, the match, I believe, went somewhere in the ballpark of 12 minutes. Swear to God. It felt like double that amount of time. Maybe even triple. Bobby and Dennis were working overtime to try to pull something remotely watchable out of these two juggernauts. God, Johnny and Jose just really weren't giving these guys jack shit to work with. They were just so generically milquetoast in their performance. Meanwhile, I'm watching the Midnights overbump and oversell everything just to try to keep the people's interest. I don't even know what there is to say about it. It's like they were doing everything under the sun to try to have the Midnights work the same style of match with Fulton and Rogers. The problem was they were wrestling Jose Lothario and Johnny Mantell, neither of whom were anywhere close to the Fantastics' level of in-ring work. I had no idea why it was so competitive, but they definitely tried some stuff. I did like Jose Lothario milking the illegal closed fist to Bobby and Dennis. When he did finally hit, the people popped. Corny was trying to rake him over the coals for it. But like even the hot tag spot at the end for Mantell's comeback, it's kind of a piss-warm tag. I mean, he only did like maybe 2 moves before the Midnights jumped him, and then it broke down into a 4-way. And I don't even remember what happened at the end. I think Cornette grabbed Johnny's ankle so Bobby could clothesline Lothario and pin him. The camera really didn't do a good job capturing all that. It was just a really strange contrast in ring styles where you basically had one team working the Mid-South style and then the other team was working a total paint-by-numbers Dallas ring style. And the problem is that the Mid-South style was way better, and it was the heels that were working it. It was just a very odd booking call. I mean, they made the right decision by having the Midnights go over, but God, 12 minutes? To a makeshift babyface team, no less? And one of those guys being in their early 50s? Quite odd. Speaking of odd, the one-man gang was in action this week. And if there is one word to accurately describe OMG, odd would be at the very top of that list. At least in the top 3. He pretty much assassinated Mike Von here in about a minute flat. The entire match consisted of Gang doing like 1 or 2 moves and then doing his signature war cry to fill in the awkward silences. If you can even call it a war cry, I'm not even entirely sure what it was supposed to be. He just kind of sounds like he's trying to squeeze out a 2-day turd. But he won with a running splash. Somehow within this 60-second time frame, we heard Bill Mercer make a Kamala reference. I believe referring to him as an enormous African. Well, that is surely one way to describe the Ugandan giant. They also aired a clip of the most recent encounter between Mike von Erich and Jake the Snake. I believe it was in Fort Worth, where Mike accepted his plaque for, Sorry, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit trying to say this aloud. Rookie of the Year. Mike von Erich. Rookie of the Year, huh? In what sane fucking universe? And Jake was so gravely offended by this award celebration, he snatched the plaque from Mike, broke it over the turnbuckle post, and all was finally right with the world. Now, I'd have done the same thing if I were Jake. Fuck, dude. Jake Roberts had dozens of better matches in Dallas than Mike von Erich could ever hope to have. I mean, I guess it's all theater anyway. No rational-minded wrestling fan would ever make the claim that Mike was a better in-ring worker than Jake Roberts. But the visual was still insulting. And then with remaining TV time, we had the main event. Jake Roberts versus Mike von Erich in the grudge match to settle the score over Mike's broken Rookie of the Year plaque. The one he will no longer get to hang over the mantelpiece to reminisce about during the holiday season. They were strategic enough to make this match not exceed any more than 5 minutes. It was the most idiot-proof Jake Roberts match I think I've ever seen. Even so, Mike still looked like a fish out of water at various points. Jake spent about 3 of those 5 minutes keeping Mike grounded with a stationary leg hold. Bill Mercer referred to this as smart strategy on Jake's part. Wholeheartedly agree. Keep Mike on the mat for as long as humanly possible so he can't do anything. That's probably not what Bill meant, but it's how I interpreted it. And then we had Mike's comeback, if you could call it that. It consisted of him going after Jake with the claw. While Jake was trying to outrun Mike around the ring, they eventually slid back in and did some running spots before Mike caught Jake with a running knee lift for the, I think it was a 3 count, but nobody really knew finish. Bill Mercer had claimed that Jake kicked out at 2.5. I was only partially paying attention anyway, so I had no idea what the fuck happened. But upon replay, I believe it was confirmed that Jake Roberts kicked out at 3.1. So Mike goes over. Jake looks dejected. I was over it. And I think so was the crowd. This was, yeah, this episode was kind of ass, looking back. Probably the best thing was the first 15 minutes with the encore feature for the Midnight's Fantastic title switch. The actual Midnight's match with Lothario and Mantell. Whew. Total clash of ring styles. The one-man gang squash was way too brief for any real input. And, the main event was mostly 3 to 4 minutes of Jake holding Mike in a stationary leg hold until the sloppy 15-second comeback, where Bill Mercer wasn't even really sure if Mike had officially gotten the pinfall or not. So yeah, it was just kind of all over the map this week. Definitely a show where they did not have a lot planned going in. They just kind of threw their hands up and said, fuck it, we're winging it. The main event was a Mike von Erich feature. The epitome of phoning it in. But, obviously I don't want to round this out on a somber note. I'm just kind of looking at my my emails blowing up on my computer right now. I get those notifications when my work emails come in, and it is quite blowy right now. So, as I'm trying to collect my thoughts about all that stuff that I have to read, why don't we go ahead and wrap this show up here? Thanks everybody for watching as always. Make sure you comment, subscribe, like, all the good stuff. Check us out on Rumble 2, Mondays and Fridays. And we'll catch you guys on Monday for the next continuation of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report. Take care. Peace out.